Good morning, everyone. Start of a new week, a massive week for Celtic, and coming off the back of another fairly decent one with the first leg victory over AZ Alkmaar and a resounding victory over St Mirren, second consecutive 6-0 win at home in the league for Celtic, Dundee and then St Mirren. And this week it's the second leg of AZ Alkmaar and then the derby against Rangers. So joining me as normal on a Monday, Sean Martin and Alison McConnell to have a quick chat about the St Mirren game, what was good, and where Celtic go from here for this week. So I think the logical place to start, Alison, is to talk about the hat-trick hero, David Turnbull. It was a cracking performance. And there were a few murmurs at the start of the season, maybe at the beginning of the month, about his suitability to the new manager's style and maybe taking a wee bit longer than some others to get up to speed, but he's well on track now.
I think he's a very impressive start to the campaign. I think he's flourishing under the system that Ange Postecoglou is playing. I think he's relishing the role he's been given. It's a fairly free and creative role. I think I was surprised that it was his first senior hat-trick, to be honest, in football, but I think he's been hinting at it in recent games. I think you've seen goals coming from him. And I think just from middle to front, it just... it just emphasises what Celtic have got in terms of the options in that area of the pitch and the attacking options. And it augurs well going into a fairly substantial week. I think no season is going to be defined on two games, but I think you can see that the game against Alkmaar to get into the Europa League and then the game against Rangers at Ibrox can help set a tone for this team, and it will also be a fairly significant barometer of just where they are in terms of where they were maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago.
Really fair point, I think, Sean, because yes, Celtic are starting to stride into a bit of higher gear at the moment, and two massive wins over Dundee and St Mirren can't just be disregarded, but the tougher tests are to come, and Celtic should be comfortably beating St Mirren and Dundee. Maybe not to that extent, but Celtic should be seeing these teams off, and St Mirren had 10 men at the weekend, so important to keep it contextual. But the bubble, it might not fully burst, but it certainly could bring a dampening spirit around the club again if things don't go well this week, considering how well they've been going the past 3 weeks. So it's important to tread the line.
It is. I mean, in terms of the St Mirren game, like, I don't think you can, as much as you're saying that the Celtic should be swatting them. I mean, they should be. But St Mirren. St Mirren beat them last year, and I mean, the manner in which they're doing it, yes, it's fine. But I mean, you might have seen Dundee played well against Hibs yesterday as well. Dundee aren't terrible, albeit they're a newly promoted side. So I think the fact that Celtic beat them 6-0 and then followed it up with another 6-0, it is as impressive as what it sounds, despite the fact the opposition aren't the best in the league, if you know what I mean. I think there's definitely confidence building going on there. I think the optimism as well from Saturday is the fact that there was a wee bit of rotation and it didn't seem to interrupt the rhythm at all, which suggests that everybody is buying into the system and what they've got to do and pulling their weight. Because it really does depend on everybody on that pitch pulling their weight, whether it's pressing or whether it's like moving to get off to create passing lanes off the ball and different things like that. It does make a difference when everybody's doing it and there's no passengers, and that certainly seemed to be the case again on Saturday. I think obviously St Mirren offered very little going forward, same as Dundee did. But either way, the type of stranglehold you have to have in a game to totally restrict teams for like most of the 90 minutes and score 6 times back to back is massively encouraging. And I think they'll go into Thursday's second leg against AZ with plenty of confidence. And I'm sure that we've used the term before, like a selection headache, but this is the best kind of selection headache that Ange Postecoglou could possibly have, you would think, for the next 2 matches, not just the AZ match, given the performances of Liel Abada, Watson Edward, Ryan Christie, and even Tom Rogic coming on for a cameo and getting his selling assist as well. It does bode well, and it's a good selection headache to have.
Yeah, well, Anthony Patrick Aitken here agreeing that it wasn't just the fact that Celtic beat St Mirren, it was the fashion that it happened. I suppose that goes for Dundee as well. And Sean, we were saying last week that Celtic are starting to develop a trend of just absolutely suffocating teams in the opening 20 minutes and giving them no hope for the rest of the game. And we were having a laugh about whether that would continue or not. And well, It absolutely did. And I think that looking at the stats from the last 3 games, not to get too bogged down in numbers, but 104 shots on goal in the last 3 domestic games. 31 against Dundee, 36 against Hearts, and then 37 against St Mirren. That's not really that normal, Alison, is it? That's quite obscene.
I think it's quite exceptional. I think what you're looking at is a team who are very reliant on playing middle to front. There's a real onus on attack. I think the manager has been fairly clear about his philosophy, about the kind of foot culture he wants to implement within his team. I think you're seeing the very early fruits of those seeds coming through now. I think people are buying into it. I think the team are probably enjoying the freedom that it brings. I think we've spoke on it before. I think it still leaves you a little bit vulnerable defensively. I think, but I think the prevailing atmosphere seems to be that, well, if we concede 2, we'll score 3, and I think fans love that too. I think it's edge of your seat kind of football. I think players probably enjoy playing in it because there's a freedom in it. I'm not saying that there's no discipline in terms of squad positioning, but that there is a certain freedom that comes with the system. And I think what you're seeing just now is it looks as though there is a joy to Celtic again. There looks as though there's an enjoyment around the club. Much of the tension and the ugliness of last season has dissipated for now. I think we all are mature enough to know that if you lose a few games, then those frustrations very quickly come back again. But what you can see just now is a sense of a new chapter coming in that everyone is encouraged by.
Let's have a wee chat about Liel Abada, Sean. I think that he's had an absolutely superb start to life in Glasgow. Probably a wee bit overshadowed, to be honest, by the impact that Kyogo Furahashi's had. And I think that maybe the credit that could be getting sent the way of Liel Abada has been diverted to the way of the Japanese international. But another 2 goals against St Mirren at the weekend, that's a really, really good start, especially for someone so young.
Aye, I mean, as you say, it's unreal that he's a teenager still, to be honest. He's totally hit the ground running, and I mean, he's direct, he's quick. He obviously loves a goal as well, which sometimes you can't really teach that if you've got the hunger to score a goal. He clearly has it. You could say, I suppose, his decision-making sometimes needs to sharpen up, but I mean, come on, he is 19, and he's playing really well for a new club in a new country, and I think the decision-making and stuff, that will come the more that he settles and the more he matures. I think Ange must be delighted with the fact that he does commit to the pressing aspect as well. His pressing's persistent. And I think, like, you would imagine that a coach, a manager like Ange, must be looking at him and just reckon that he can mould him into exactly what he feels is required, given his age and the attributes that he's got. It's a very good start from him, and I'm sure there's even more to come by the sounds of it.
Alison, how impressed, or otherwise, if that's the way that you're opinionated, have you been by Liel Abada?
I would agree with everything that Sean said. I think it's remarkable for a 19-year-old to come in and settle so quickly. Like Furuhashi, I think, they've been here for 5 minutes and look as though they're an integral part of the team so quickly. I don't think that's a given for anyone coming into a new team, even if you're staying within the culture that you've grown up in and that you know. But I think it's very difficult to come from elsewhere and step into it. I think he's been particularly impressive. I think it would have helped that he scored early on, that he came in, he netted the goal, and I think it just facilitates the ease of coming into a new side. But at 19, I think he looks at a fairly formidable prospect. I do just wonder about his longevity this season, about how many games he might play, and if there might be a tendency to rest him for some games and not overplay him. But I think he might make that a tough decision just because of what he's contributed when he's been starting.
Well, the winger pool is deeper now. We've recognised that, Sean, previously as well. Obviously, Forrest is still there, but Abada, Furuhashi can play left. Christie's being deployed on the left. Johnson and Dembele have still to come back to fitness. So things are looking fairly decent in that regard, yeah?
I think so. I mean, I genuinely do think that it bodes well having those options going forward, both in terms of time and the fact going forward on the pitch. I think Alison's already alluded to it, middle to front. That's not really where the concern is. I mean, Celtic have looked really, really good middle to front, especially the last few weeks. it's obviously the other side that has been the concern. And I know you can't really look too far into it when it's St Mirren and they're down to 10 men and they don't offer anything really going forward. So the real test will come in the next 2 games with the defence and how much it's exposed and how much to deal with it. Because I do think that the way that Ange wants to play, it will naturally just expose the defence. So it's really how they deal with it and how they deal with a setback that would be the key thing.
Yeah, the games this weekend or this week, I think, are going to be a much harder test than what Celtic have faced so far. AZ Alkmaar was not an easy game at Parkhead last week. They had a good few chances, as we recognised in the articles that we've put out. Celtic were clinical when theirs came along and have a healthy lead going to the Netherlands. But an early goal for Alkmaar is going to really, really test the resolve of how this team has been put together, Alison.
Yeah, it would tip the balance of the tie. I think at the minute Celtic are very much in the ascendancy in terms of going through the playoff and taking the group spot. But you're right to say that a goal would just flip that entirely. But what I would say is that I think the fact that Celtic have goals in them now will create a level of confidence that maybe wasn't there a month ago. So I think if there are moments of adversity in games, it maybe just helps mentally to know that the likelihood is that you're going to create chances and you're going to score some of those chances, and that facilitates a way to get out of whatever problems you might have in terms of managing a game and managing a tie. I think 2-0 can be a funny scoreline for a European tie, albeit now that the away goals rule doesn't have a say in it, but I still think it's fairly precarious. I think if Celtic were to go and score first, it becomes much easier to manage and to see the game out, whereas obviously the converse is true if Alkmaar are to score early on or even to score just in the first hour. I think it can give you something to think about in terms of how you go and manage it. But I do think the fact that there are goals in this team just might offer a level of confidence that Celtic have been stripped of for much of last season and in maybe the opening tentative games of this season.
Odsonne Edouard has started the season fairly well. Sean, that's 3 goals now, and he's not been the integral focal point of the attack as he has been for Celtic over the past couple of seasons. But scored against Dundee, scored in the League Cup win against Hearts, and scored again against St Mirren. Do you start him against Alkmaar, or do you fancy Furuhashi through the middle instead?
I think I'll keep my cards close to my chest on that one until we're doing the predictions. I thought he played well. I thought it was a decent performance. I thought he held the line well, high and central. I know you might think that's easy enough because they were attack, but he does like to drift. We all know that, and I think the fact that Kyogo has been so effective when he's played central at keeping the line high and playing on the edge and making sure the defence has to keep an eye on him. I think Edouard's almost taken a leaf out of that book, and on Saturday done it again. He was high and central, got his goal. Despite the fact that Celtic were so dominant, Edouard's passing, he wasn't as involved as what I would expect him to have been. But he still, he played 82 minutes and for 6-0 drubbing, so I would expect his passing to be in the maybe 20s or 30s. But it wasn't really. I think it was in the teens. But still, it's good for him that he's playing well, and it's good for the club. You've got to remember, the contract situation hasn't gone away. It's still there. So the window shuts in 8 days? 7 days, 8 days? So if we're still thinking that he's going to be going, the fact that he's playing well benefits everybody, really.
How do you assess this situation, Alison? Sean's right, it's not gone away. Odsonne Edouard could well leave Celtic in the next week.
I think it's probably in everyone's best interest that he does, to be fair. I think if the club want to bring in some money for him rather than risk him signing a pre-contract in January and going for nothing, then I think you have to look at it and say, this is, you would want him to go now before the window closes, unless he comes back and there's been a considerable change of heart to say, well, I want to be part of this. In which case, I think you would maybe want to offer him a new contract then, because you would want to be assured of protecting yourself financially and protecting some kind of deal. I don't think any of us expect that to happen. So I think the inevitability will be that something could change before the closure of the window. What I would say about Edouard, though, is that there were criticisms again at the start of the season about his application and levels of commitment. I don't think that could be in question in terms of recent performances.
David Bradley seems fairly set in his ways here. He says, get the money now, Celtic. If it's time for Edouard to go, thanks for your contribution. The contract situation also hasn't left Ryan Christie at the moment. There are reports this morning, Alison, from the Record, I think, actually, that Burnley have been linked with him for the last 18 months, it feels like, and also Sampdoria, another one of the foreign clubs you can add to the list alongside Nice and Monaco that we've heard about. Really interesting to see what happens there, because Christie, if he wanted right now, could just sign a pre-contract with another team. I'm actually quite astounded that hasn't happened, to be honest.
I think I'd probably be more astounded that an offer hasn't been put to him to stay at Celtic. I think he looks like he could be a pivotal part, play a key role in this team. And he's another one that I think he looks as though he's enjoying his football just now. I think common sense to give him a decision to make by putting something on the table.
Sean, what are your views on how Ryan Christie should, or how Celtic should deal with Ryan Christie here?
I think I've mentioned this a good few times, wrote an article on it as well. I think he's perfect for Ange Postecoglou. I think we've already saw that. I think he can also, he offers a degree of versatility as well, and where he can fill in. And I think you get the pressing and the effort that Ange is looking for, regardless of where you play him, and no shortage of quality as well. I think I used the phrase before, you don't want to go too godfather on it, but genuinely just make him an offer he can't refuse and get him to stay. I think that said, if he's set on going, then I think he would be away already. So as long as the door's still open, I think Celtic need to try and walk through it with him.
Even just an 18-month extension, and a situation similar to what Stuart Armstrong ended up having.
I mean, that's what I was going to say there, Armstrong, when you mentioned an extension. If he signs an extension, again, and similar to the way that I'm saying about Edouard, like if Edouard is wanting to go and Celtic want to sell him playing well only benefits both parties in that sense. And I think if Christie was to sign an extension, even if it was just to the end of the season, ideal if it was longer, then if he plays the way that I think he will play under Ange, I actually think that the suitors will probably be better for him after it. But it is a risk. I mean, it's a risk from the club and from him, I suppose you could say. But I personally think it would thrive if he stays.
Well, we've got a whole week to build up to the derby on Sunday, but we'll have a wee chat about it just now, just a couple of minutes. Things have started to turn in opposite directions at both clubs. I suppose Rangers have had a fairly sticky start to the season. Celtic started poorly, but have vastly improved over the last 3 weeks. Sean, what do you see happening on Sunday? We don't need to go into full prediction mode, but how are you feeling?
I think, to be honest, a lot of that will depend on the AZ game for me. I think it depends how that plays out as to how confident Celtic will be going into that game. I still think, even if the worst happens against AZ, they will still have a degree of confidence. As Alison said, they probably go into every game now thinking they're going to score at least a couple. But I think a lot of it will be dependent on the way that plays out against AZ. I think there's every reason to be confident. If you're asking now, 6 days away, I think there is every reason to be confident. Whether it's at Ibrox or not, I don't think it matters. I think they will have that confidence. I also think it's never quite as extreme as what people like to make out sometimes. It's never as magnificent at one club, and it's never quite as bad as what it seems at the other. I think it's also a derby. I think, Alison, you put it in your column the other day. The form book doesn't actually go out the window for it. There is a precedent there that the team with the most belief in the team that's in form does tend to actually do better. So I think there's that to consider as well when it comes to the AZ game as to how Celtic will approach it on Sunday.
Alison, that then surely does point to a closer game than what we might have expected in the not too distant past.
Yeah, I think so. To reiterate, I do think the team with the momentum and the belief invariably comes out on top. I agree with Sean. I think what happens midweek over in the Netherlands will definitely have a part to play in terms of Celtic's preparation. What I would say is, I think they have goals in them. I think they know there are goals within the team. You mentioned the stats there about how many shots have been created in recent games. I think that does create a level of calmness, a level of assurance. I don't think Celtic will lose the game. I don't know if it will be a win, but I would say just now, I don't think they'll lose it.
Okay, bold. Right, well, we'll carry on with our preview of the game on Sunday as we carry on through the week with the morning briefings. But for now, Sean, Alison, thanks for joining me.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Andy.